Okay, let's start. Welcome to our latest UX Greece meetup and the last of this season. I'm Ioannis Feneris, and next to me, Dimitris Stathis and Dimitris Niavis. Okay, a quick introduction. Sorry, I just messed up the slides. Sorry for that. Okay, great. I'm okay. So just a quick intro for our new friends. UX Greece is a vibrant community of UX and product professionals with roots in local Greek communities and events. Every quarter, we invite global speakers to chat about everything UX. Our meetups are all about the conversation. So as always, we are relying on your questions to keep things interesting. If you are here, you are already a member of the community, so just make sure that you follow our LinkedIn group and you will be the first to know about all our upcoming meetups. This is the link. I will pop the link into the chat in just a second. A big shout out to our amazing sponsors before we introduce today's guest, Junction Labs from Scratch Studio and the UX Prodigy. They not only make our meetups possible, but they are also offering some seriously cool books as gifts. And here's what you can you have to do to snag one. Just post a message on LinkedIn, say hi, thank our guest, or better yet, share a memorable moment from today's meetup with your network. And use the hashtags UX and UX Greece. You've got until 5 hours from now to post. We will collect all the posts tomorrow, pick the winners at random, and then contact them directly on LinkedIn. A friendly reminder I love to give every time, don't be shy with your questions. Drop them in the chat or raise your hand to ask our guest directly. This is what it's all about. This is why we have these meetups. So that was a very quick introduction. Dimitris, would you like to do the honors and introduce our special guest for today?
Do I? I think Angelos can introduce himself even better than I will. Angelos, if you want me to say a few words.
No, I'm fine. Don't worry about it.
All right, cool.
Thank you. And before I start, by the way, I do have slides. Do you not want me to have slides? They're pretty.
We do want the slides, but we do want the conversation after the presentation.
Yeah, for sure. And of course, people can interrupt me whenever they feel like it. So we can still keep it conversational.
They are pretty.
Wait, this is my background only. Wait. Okay, now you can see probably the presentation, I hope. Correct? Right. So my name is Angelos, and I'm a design operations professional. Some people started calling themselves design operators, but I somehow have a weird feeling about this word. I don't know. I'm a design operations professional. That's how I prefer to say it. Doesn't matter. It's just semantics. But I've been in that field for a few years now, and I would say, and I always say that I'm a DesignOps practitioner, mostly by necessity. So, you know, I'm coming from in-house teams, struggling to find cohesion in how designers worked together as a team, but also cross-functionally. And a lot of you likely share the same experience with me. So your title was probably something designer, but you spend your time trying to figure out how you could have made the onboarding experience of your new colleagues better, or how you can create a style guide so that your work would not start from scratch every time. So even if you're not calling yourself a design operations person, likely you have done a lot of operationalizing to make your life and your colleagues' life easier. And so the premise of this is to sort of introduce a little bit on the 360 level, so to speak, of what DesignOps is, and hopefully have a conversation afterwards about challenges or some like unanswered questions, stuff like that. I would rely on you, Ioannis, and everyone else to share if there's something from the chat, for example, because I cannot see that. But yeah, feel free to interrupt also if needed. Okay. So disclaimer, because we have to do this now. This content is not generated by AI, and you will, after this slide, you will hear 0 mentions to AI as well. So I thought I would keep it very, very human. Cool. So before we start, I always start my presentations by talking about Conways Law. I would like to begin, though, with a short story that's pretty relevant, and every person who is working in-house has probably identified with it. In 1968, a paper by computer scientist Melvin Conway wrote the following: any organization that designs a system will inevitably produce a design whose structure is a copy of the organization's communication structure. So what this observation meant in layman's terms was simply that dysfunctional organizations tend to create dysfunctional applications. And the funny part of this story is that Harvard Business Review rejected Conway's article that contained this famous quote, later to be framed as Conway's Law, because he was lacking proof. And I really find this ironic, and it's a comment that that is really stuck with me whenever and wherever I go, basically. If you're interested in this article, it is of course very old, but it's called "How Do Committees Invent?" Very thought-provoking for its time, so to speak, in business terms. We all know that different orgs have different ways of operating. So what often happens with products is that organizations build their teams and assign their product managers around functions. So a typical e-commerce organization would have teams like growth, search, browse, product pages, shopping cart, reviews, and so on. But what if instead we organized around customer needs, for example? What if it was less about features? And so, as Ken Norton, who was back then, at least back then, senior operating partner in Google Ventures, said, when each PM has a discrete ownership over an experience end to end, they can understand the customer problems more deeply and go all in on representing their needs. And you do not have to go very far to see this happening. For example, in many teams that you can name on top of your head, like teams like Apple, for example, a lot of functions are structured around the customer themselves. And this is actually something funny. In a previous company that I was, I asked the team when we had a workshop together to draw the organizational chart, and one of the designers came up with this. So I really like the fact that the UX team, so to speak, is the Trojan horse, and the project is the I guess Troy. And you can see there's like business, there's time, there's interest, there's dev resources, and there's the sign there, "Thou shalt not pass." But we come bearing gifts, and then we sort of go in and break everything apart. And I think that's kind of like a very funny metaphor, but also it has a hint of truth inside it. So in the end, what we're trying to talk about here is that communication is hard, and a product is a complicated thing, but once you add the human layer on top of that, the complexity is dramatically increased. So how do we get it right? We do that by designing the org right. And I often funnily say that org design for design orgs, if you haven't read that book, now put it in your list. I'm saying that this is the holy Bible of design operations people, because at least when I read it, I started highlighting pretty much every paragraph, because it was so spot on to kind of like to what they observed and what they reported in the book, but also the suggestions that they provided afterwards. Because when design is reduced to simply the deliverable, as opposed to design being an ongoing part of the development process in general, it is seen merely as an execution. So it is seen as a function of the tech team. It is hard to justify the value of design because it's not shown directly through UI or just UI. In mature customer-centric companies, designers, developers, they co-create their own ways of working. Design works on strategic level. They work with facilitation, service design, research, coaching, and so on. However, still, unless design is seen holistically, a compartmentalized design jumbled into silos is hard to measure as well. So design should be an equal partner to product management, technology, business in general, and how we operate. So this conflict, three-legged stool, I think it comes from the book as well, and from Peter Merholz. So the idea of if one of these legs of this stool is smaller, you will trip and fall down. So all of them have to be of equal size. And in a nutshell, design creates impact through various angles, often not related to UI at all, or any specific design field in particular, for that matter. It takes people working in different fields, as I said, service design, user experience, visual design, research, strategy, and so on. And then as a team, they leverage design's value for the customer, but also for the organization itself. And with our current understanding of what makes effective design teams to succeed, we introduce design operations and design systems as the logical next step of mature design teams working in-house. In order for design teams to be effective, they have to have certain traits. Those traits are seen repeatedly throughout industries where corporations invest highly in design. Here are the 12 qualities of effective design organizations that are identified by Christian Skinner and Peter Merholz. They are drawn from experience running global design firm. They were then going in-house. They were bought by a huge company. And then the concern was that big investments are not going to pay off, not the product design, but also the unseen stuff that are going behind the scenes that ultimately affect the quality of design itself. So these qualities are informed by interviews with design leaders in Apple, IBM, Wells Fargo, Google, Walmart, you have it, they talk to everyone, and then they came up with these. I'm not gonna read them through, you can take a screenshot if you want, or we can share the slides later as well, if that's a thing. I'm okay with that. But yeah, things like authentic user empathy, supporting the entire journey and stuff like that, they're pretty spot on in how mature design organizations are working to leverage the quality of design. And so enter design operations. DesignOps has been around for a while. We just called it different things. If you ever worked as a consultant, you can think of studio management, for example. So DesignOps is everything that supports high quality crafts, methods, and processes. And as Dave Malouf says, DesignOps is all the pieces of the system necessary to support the practice of design and amplify its quality. High-functioning design teams align with engineering and products. And why do we need it? Because teams and problems get larger and more complex, respectively. So we have larger teams, larger number of teams, larger number of systems, larger number of types and integrations. So things can get chaotic as things scale in an organization. And design operations helps teams to run more effectively by letting designers focus on design while leaving everything else to the operations team. Many organizations, they expect their designers to wear many hats: a project manager, a little bit, cross-functional partner, creative leader, logistical coordinator. However, these additional roles, they reduce the time your designer can devote to your product and users. And so it's very important to, of course, not keep designers away from these things, but try to find a balance between how much time it is actually effective for designers to do design versus the rest of the stuff. DesignOps comes in all shapes and forms. It can be a department, a person, it can just be a mindset that works towards scaling design teams with more efficiency, not only in terms of talent and numbers, though. DesignOps can be a team of one, like in most cases. As the profession is maturing, we see more teams of 2 to 4 design operation professionals coming together. And some organizations, of course, they have established DesignOps departments as well, where they work with many facets of the org. And the impact is in work efficiency, which leads to improving quality. Therefore, it amplifies the value. But it also contributes to cross-functional collaboration. And I believe this is the most important part of the job, the sanity of your design team in general. So often we say that we're also, in a way, the team's therapist as well, because we like to hear people, we like to hear the problems, and we like to then understand how can we move forward to go about solving them. And I often say that the simplest way to explain DesignOps is that it's service design for the design team. Traditionally, in service design, value is created at the point of the customer. So the things that support the service to create that value is the back of the house. if you think of the analogy of a supermarket, value is created at the shelves, at the checkouts, and the many different customer touch points that are in the market. But without handling the logistics, supply and demand, forecasts, and other processes, the whole experience would be horrible. And similarly, in the design org, value is on the production level of design, but when someone is using the product, but we need to have a lot of things in the background to make this process smooth. And so how do designers create value? I hope you kept notes. I don't need your answers. This is a philosophical question. Wait for it, designing. And this is very important. So what does DesignOps do? Let's take a look at the DesignOps menu from the article of Nielsen Norman Group called DesignOps 101. We work with how we work together. So we work with organizing, how do we structure our teams, how do we build the right teams, we do collaboration, so how do we create environments and gatherings that enable effective communication, how do we get work done, meaning how do we standardize things and harmonize them, how do we share and expand design intelligence so that we can work from the same shared understanding and build common grounds with other people, and how work creates impact. For example, how do we measure design? How do we socialize? How do we educate others about design and so on? Again, in the end, I'm going to share these resources, so feel free to not go about and search for them now. And then we also have some DesignOps initiatives. I wrote some initiatives that I have been doing, in my work currently, for example. So on resourcing, I'm doing things like skills mapping, understanding the skill levels of the designers, the skill types of designers, and then understanding what gaps do we have and what do we do about going to, to solve them by, development of the designers and their skills as well. Mentorship programs. In program management, there's a lot of things about processes, like we work into introducing a design-led process now to the whole organization, which means that, we want to work with a lot of different artifacts in order to bring more evidence in the way that we work. Documentation, again, artifacts relate to that as well, but putting things down that we can find them and we can build nuggets of information out of them. Team morale, like doing offsites, trainings, the fun part sometimes, and some talks like I'm doing now, and other things like workshop program alignment. So for example, having space for facilitation and having actual space where designers can meet together. This is something that we have been building here. So like building a design studio where all the designers are coming in and they're working together. So these are things that DesignOps has as initiatives. And of course, these are not new things that now DesignOps has invented, but previously it all fell into design leadership itself, without having design operations or operators basically on the side. So always be templating. Artifacts are an integral part of work. And I use them quite a lot as a DesignOps professional. For example, when entering a new design team, or if you're just interested into finding out some things and documenting them, making them visual, do the DesignOps canvas. This is available for free. You can find it. It's like basically, a canvas, like the business model canvas. And you can use it to understand your audience, your teams, and understand your org structure. And I'm not only reusing others' canvases, but also create my own. So I have used this like designer journey and created it because I wanted to understand the designer capacity and where there are problems within the design process and within the teams that the designers are working with. So I created this customer journey that maps activities, pain points, levels of visibility and impact, opportunities for designers and their teams. And as a bonus, I have also asked them to map how much time do they spend in meetings, and more importantly, how much productive time do they spend in meetings? And then, coming up with solutions to answer this, let's say, pain points or questions or meeting time that goes wasted. Another thing
May I ask a question, Angelos?
Yes.
Sorry for interrupting. About the last two, the measurements, the perceived, the time that they spent in meetings and their perceived usefulness of spending the time in these meetings. What did you do with this data? How did it go?
Well, of course, you have to first understand from the calendar of the designer, how much time is it like, averagely spent on meetings. And then, if that time is not going into design, or if that designer is, for example, just attending to listen and not gain something out of it, it might be a good indication that either the whole meeting has to change or the designer could be potentially be pulled off from that meeting, understanding the actual value of the meeting itself. Here in Smartly, for example, we're striving to ask people to have clear agendas and, of course, not have meetings if they can avoid them. So Slack is our almost secondary communication, so to speak, when it comes to communicating with the team. We use Google Meet for meeting each other, and of course, meeting in person as well. And then we use Slack for the rest. And so we try to do a lot of async as much as possible, with sharing, Google Docs as well, and Miro boards and so on. Of course, sometimes it can get very chaotic, but it's something that, in a way, you want to give your designers time to do the design, because many people might end up overworking themselves as well.
I see. So, is this the responsibility of the DesignOps manager to go and say, hey, let's get these designers out of these meetings, or give them more time to do their work, or do they have to report these numbers themselves?
It's a conversation, I would say. So, basically you have to understand, of course, if they are team meetings, so if it's something that is organized by the PM, for example, what is the person of this meeting? Is the designer contributing in a meaningful way? Sometimes they might be in important meetings, but they might not be contributing enough. So then you might want to say that, well, let's try to amplify the value of the designer in this meeting. So for example, bringing their own perspective, the design perspective, into the meeting, so that, the product managers do not really invent the problems themselves, but, there's, for example, research involved, and, you can bring the evidence in and so on, and represent basically the user. I'm not saying that product managers they do not care about the users. Obviously, many of them, they do, but sometimes, the designers, they have to be the advocate of that. So.
Thank you.
Yeah. So yeah, one of the things that I've created here is the design process documentation template. So through the customer journey artifact that I presented before, a lot of these different activities can be mapped out as, activities that basically, you can also call it like a menu. So, these activities are things that designers are doing. This is how much time that it takes for a typical activity, like, let's say, a workshop to be done, or like a design sprint, for example. This is how much effort does it take, and this is the things that are the prerequisites, for example, for this activity to actually make sense and work into your advantage, for example. So a lot of my work is, as I said, it's about templating, but it's also making things visual. So a lot of people are going to talk about the problems, and the problems are always discussed in water cooler, meetings and in person, for example, and so on. But until you actually document something and you present it in some sort of form, and of course you create some storytelling about it, just by the problem being there doesn't mean that someone will do something about it. Obviously, by just visualizing it also doesn't mean anything. But once you visualize it, people, it has a lot more impact to people. Yeah, so let's talk a little bit about DesignOps superpowers, crafting systems, processes, and tools. Some of those tools are unfortunately Excel sheets. Working with tools, though, to also make designers more effective together. For example, creating templates for Figma, and that might be a thing, or asking the design system team to create their own templates for Figma. Excelling in cross-functional collaboration. Your cross-functional partners are product managers. There might be also other operation people if they are there. Like, for example, in my company, we have engineering operations, but we don't have PM operations, for example. So this is something that maybe in the future will become a thing. But until then, for example, engineering operations and design operations are working together to sort of create something for the product management as well. Translating the what, when, why, and how of design. A lot of things might be, again, in the background. Some people might be saying, well, what are those designers doing? So kind of trying to find the, again, not only the UIs, but the real value of designers, whether it is, a workshop, or trying to tie down design to metrics like customer satisfaction and so on. Advocating, influencing, and tailoring the message for different audiences. when designers were talking together, we're talking a lot about things like UX depth and stuff like that. But this might not mean anything to an executive, for example. So if you talk to them about these problems that we have here that we call ourselves UX depth, they are creating some lag in time to market, for example. The executive is going to listen to you much more closely. And it is the same thing, but it's all about translating the message to the right audience. Mapping the complex structures of the organization. Again, it's all about templating, putting things down, visualizing them, understanding and listening to team needs, having a lot of one-to-ones with people, repeating those one-to-ones, but also, in the very beginning, when you enter the org, it's very important to just go around and talk to people and understand things from their perspective. Like, for example, whenever I join a new team, I have this system that I call, it's not my system, I guess it's a lot of people are doing it. I call it listening tour. And basically I go around and talk to every designer, every PM, well, not every engineer, because sometimes there are far too many, but like an engineering manager or anything like that. And then I ask them the questions: what works well, what doesn't work well, and what can I do to help? So just by asking these 3 questions, you create a lot of space for them to tell you things and, of course, write them down. Helping design leadership succeed. Obviously, it's in your best interest. It's in their best interest as well. But kind of like, being the operational counterpart, basically the right hand of the design leadership, it also helps. And steering the teams through design process, helping them to understand it, helping them to understand that having a design process doesn't mean that we follow each and every step to the exact, rule, but it's there to guide you and to make you a better designer. Yanis, you have your hand up.
Yeah, quick question. Is it okay to ask you questions during the presentation, or do you want to move the
We can do it whenever, but I'm almost finished. So
great. So this is for everyone. Now, a question. Have you seen any disadvantages, any downsides after organizing the operations of design team? Because, for example, maybe because you take away from team members the happiness to be able to try new tools and the new operations and new flows. So have you ever been, have you have this experience that we are going too much into organizing things and we are not part of this as an issue?
For some things, yes. Like, for example, I can give you one example of trying to make our work more visible by, for example, adopting Jira has not been an easy thing for the design team. Every designer hates Jira, right? But again, it's a thing that can help us. Like, it's a tool that we can use to our advantage, and we can say that, these are the things that designers are working. This is the time that it takes for a designer to work on a specific task. And we also know that during 1 month, all the designers are fully staffed, for example, with work. So we can create leverage with creating evidence and say, like, now we need more people as well. Or we can also say, we can understand that designers are overworked, and we can say when a new project comes that, like, no, sorry, we don't have the capacity to work on it. So while things, might be a little bit difficult sometimes to adopt, and it feels, doing administration work, so to speak, some things sometimes are necessary evil. And, of course, in the end of the day, it's work. So you have to, in a way, find the right ways to do it, the right automations to do it with, for example, and to make designers' life easier as much as possible, but by still using some things that are necessary evil, so to speak.
Understood. My concern and my experience is that we are still in the romantic phase of having, product and design. We are just, 10, 15, or 20 years of having this kind of roles of digital product designers and product people. So we are still at the romantic phase, and we are still, it's so nice to find new tools and new AI tools, or not AI tools, and new ways to organize things. And I always see the junior designers after a while trying to find how to find a better way to organize the operations by themselves, and this gives them motivation. So my concern is that if we have a specific team or a specific person that organizes all this, then you take away this happiness, this motivation
Right, yeah. So don't worry about it, because like most of the DesignOps team, as I said in the start, is a team of one, and that likely means that this person will not be able to do all the things that that they're supposed to. So as I said also in the beginning, it doesn't really mean that you take all the operational stuff away from designers and no one is allowed to work with them. It's about finding the right cadence and balance into doing those. For us, it means, for example, if you think about as a ballpark rule, so to speak, that designers should be spending like 80% of their time doing something productive or design, right? That means that they have in a week, they have one day full of doing something else as well. Of course, that's not as linear as it sounds. It's not like a rule that everyone follows to the bone, but it's something that you can use as guidance to assign projects, or people say, hey, I'm very passionate about research. So like, oh, cool. Can you please try to find what kind of research repository tools can we use to make our lives easier? So then I don't have to think about that. And the designer who is passionate about that, they will spend the time, rightfully so, to find the best tools and so on. So I don't know if I'm answering your question, but what I'm trying to say basically is that there is a lot of space for people to do this kind of work.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Right. So actually, this was my last slide. The next one is a thank you. I have the sources that I've been mentioning here, so feel free to go and buy them or look at them, like the Org Design for DesignOps and What is DesignOps. I think they're books or booklets. Then there's some articles, DesignOps 101 and a pocket guide to DesignOps, which is also very good. And I've also been, actually, I have been very bad at maintaining it currently, but I have a resource documenting.design, which is basically a Notion page where it has all the DesignOps stuff that I find useful. So you will not only find articles and stuff like that, but you will find some resources that you can possibly use. For example, you will find the DesignOps Canvas as well. Yeah, I will stop here blabbering, and then I will take more questions.
Thank you, Angelos. By the way, Peter Merholz was the previous guest we had.
Oh yeah,
on
nice.
So it was a great thing to see him here. Also, yes, Kate Kaplan's course on NNG is amazing. It's really cool. I think I've done this a couple of years ago, but she keeps updating this, and it's really it goes to many places.
Yeah.
Really good. If you people are interested in DesignOps, highly recommended. And I think that we have Stratos has a question. Would you like to unmute and ask Angelos your question?
Yes. Hello.
Hello.
Yes.
Hello.
Yep.
Hello, Angelos. My question is, when do you think there is the necessity to hire a DesignOps design team? How many team members do you think are necessary in order to have a dedicated person for this stuff you mentioned?
This is the $1 million question.
Yes, I guess so.
There is not a single answer to this. So like, I will tell you by experience, for example. I joined here in the security company that I am, Smartly. I joined about 7 months ago now, 6 months ago. And they had 16 designers by then. And there's so much work that will keep me busy for the next at least 2 years, let's say. So there's a lot of work to be done there already with that many people. So for me, at least, it's a good indication that when you have a team of, I would say 10. If you wanna put, let's say, something around it there, when you have a team of 10, it's a good indication that maybe you could think of someone to at least start adopting a mindset of design operations. Because likely when you start with a team of 3 designers, you start thinking about, hey, what about the design system? And then you start operationalizing already some stuff. You create rules. Then as the team grows, probably you start thinking about principles. What is the design language in general, and so on. So, it's kind of like, naturally you see that you are doing the operations. And as I said in the start, everyone does a form of it anyway, because you want to be more efficient, and, you don't want your work to be painful in a way. So, yeah, like, around the time of let's say 10 designers, I would say, if you want my suggestion, so to speak, is, start thinking about who could be a good candidate to take it at least as mindset, someone who would be there as the go-to person, although they're not a designer person per se in title, but like in mindset.
And another one follow-up. Do you think there is an overlap between your profession and the designing lead, let's say, of the team? I'm meaning about some decisions about the tooling, the processes, the communication with other teams. Is there an overlap between you and the design lead?
Well, the DesignOps person usually manages the process of, let's say, acquiring the tooling and stuff like that. Not necessarily like let's say how designers are going to use it. Of course, if it's not the lead's responsibility, so to speak, to build a team's let's say ways of working when it comes to how they use Figma, for example, DesignOps person can likely go in and start thinking about some things. For example, in my experience, it also depends, right? So there's design leads who can be also managers. There's also lead designers sometimes who are still, let's say, contributors, but they still might do some operational stuff. But those people are your partners in a way. So, they're not your, they're your counterparts in the design team. So, they can bring the voice of the team. Of course, you can still have one-to-ones with the team anyway, but there are people who will support you and you will support them. And they do need your support quite a lot, because likely if there's a lead that has even 4 or 5 designers, it means that they might have to do performance reviews as well and stuff like that. And it takes away from their time that they can support their team sometimes.
Okay. So the decisions is still on them.
Depends on which kind of decisions. I would say, like, if the team was using, let's say, Sketch and they want to adopt Figma, it's not the DesignOps person decision to make, but the DesignOps person can say, well, these are the good things, these are the bad things, but test Figma out, for example, and find out if that's good for you. If not, then maybe keep on using Sketch, or like find another tool. For example, some teams might want to use, I don't know, Framer or whatever else, depending on the product as well. So as you are the service designer of the team, as I said in the start, you want to make sure that you're doing the best for the team, but also, of course, within the limitations that you might be presented in the organization. If you're in a larger organization, you might not be able to adopt certain tools because of security reasons as well. So then even if the lead wants to decide that, this is a thing that we want to do, maybe you have to be the bearer of bad news and say, sorry, it's impossible because this tool doesn't really, comply with our legal responsibilities or something.
Great. Thanks.
Thank you, Stratos. I have a question. I'm not sure the source of the question, but I'm going to give it to you by the anonymous. How do you measure the impact of the success of having design operations versus not having one? So let's say we are 10 people right now. We don't have design operations. We do have design operations, but not as structured as we're talking about. So we are proposing the stakeholders to have a DesignOps person or start this initiative. So the question is why I have to do this right now. What is the impact? What are the metrics? So what can we say to them?
Multiple questions, eh?
So it's a group of questions.
Yeah. It also depends on what we mean by impact. Is it the monetary impact, or is it an impact that you have on the design team itself? One of the bragging moments that I have in a way as a DesignOps person was that I adopted DesignOps in a corporation that I worked before. And it wasn't a real role back then, but I did the work anyway. then I, at some point I left from that team. And then 2 years after, someone sent me a screenshot that had my name on it, and I say, hey, what's that? And they were like, well, we did this like designer recognition. And mind you, I was kind of like, 2 years gone from that team. And they mentioned, who they wanted to reward, this person for doing this person for doing that, and so on. And then there was like the ghost of Angelos. And like, it was echoed from some people in a way, not because I did something that was revolutionary in a way, but, I started working with the designers and mapping their skills. One example there was, we had one team that they felt that the designers, they didn't have clear lines of responsibility, and they felt that they were conflicting sometimes, and there were some conflicts that were happening within the team. So until we sat down and we asked everyone, what is your role? What are your responsibilities? What are the things that you do? Until then, they haven't realized that, they were not really conflicting. They just thought so. Everyone was focusing on different things, for example. And when I presented this to their manager, for example, their manager was like, why don't we do this for developers? And I was like, yeah, I mean, that's a good question, but, it's not my focus right now. Like, I can help you to do that for the developers, but like, I'm doing it for the designer point of view. And so, yeah, there is a level of impact that you're doing to the design team by solving their issues and making their life at work easier, which doesn't necessarily, you can always, of course, measure it by, let's say, attrition rates that you had before having a DesignOps role, attrition rates that you have after you had a DesignOps role. That could be a thing. I think measuring impact is something that it is discussed quite a lot in conferences, and people are trying to find different and meaningful things. But I don't know if there's any single thing that would be kind of like, this is the metric for measuring DesignOps. I would say, even by doing surveys and asking the teams kind of like, how do they feel about the DesignOps person could be one thing as well, or at least, a measure that you can, in a way, use to understand where you're at, and, what can you make better in a way for the team. And I don't know if I'm answering your question right now, but I'll put a pause here.
If I understand this correctly, one of the questions that goes through our minds is the ROI of doing DesignOps, right? Mm-hmm. This is something, and we want to understand how have you practiced, how have you measured this in order to convince someone to start doing it. As you said before, you did it guerrilla style. You started doing this, and you had people saying, yeah, Angelos rocks. Yeah. We need more of that. So there are a lot of companies with low UX maturity around the globe, right? So how can someone start doing this guerrilla DesignOps and then measure baseline before, and then measure the ROI of what you actually achieved for the team and the company? In your opinion, what do you suggest?
Should I say, it depends. It depends from the point of view of, you have to understand how far can you push in an org, for example, and be comfortable with it, the pushback that you might get. A lot of things that I've done when in that specific company, for example, I was doing it guerrilla, as you said, and not asking for permission, but kind of like, asking for forgiveness later. And what that resulted, in a way, it resulted to formalizing a role after I left, unfortunately, formalizing a role for a design operations person in that company, for example. Why was this important in a way? Because designers, it's not like they didn't want to, but they didn't have the time to sit around with people from HR and talk to them about training, about upskilling designers, about giving the right titles to designers and the right recognition to them. People didn't have the time to talk with product managers and tell them, there is value in not creating the plan for the team yourself, but getting the input from design and technology and making better decisions by using more evidence into your your process to make things better if that team is not doing that, and so on. So kind of like, you know, all the things that you're doing is basically you try to pretty much connect the dots, and as I said earlier, of course, you know, template a lot. So like, you know, putting things down and, you know, understanding things. Like, for example, one example for us was in order to jumpstart the design system, we had to map how many instances of buttons and stuff like that are we using in our code. So, you know, I worked with developers and I said, you know, can you please write a script and help me out here? And they did, and we found that we use 800 buttons. So kind of like, you know, oh, okay, so, you know, buttons are something that is very much used in this. So maybe we should have a design system that, you know, uses only one button and you can build it once and so on. Again, you know, making things visual, showing people the numbers, and then working your way with that. Because of course, if you show it to an exec as well, they're going to be like, well, that's insanity. Why do we have like so many buttons? And what can we do about it? So again, I don't know if because, you know, I cannot tell you that DesignOps is directly impacting the CSAT or the NPS or the eNPS, if you want, you know, of the employee NPS and so on. But yeah, it's something that I guess the value comes by, you know, connecting people, being a cross-functional partner, helping people out, basically, product management as well, and so on, to do their work better.
Great.
Cool.
Yeah. Can I ask the question now?
Yeah.
As I was hearing all this process that you were trying to, you know, to figure out stuff, and as you did that, you know, in a guerrilla style, I would be very interested, you know, what kind of strategies or methodologies have you implemented in order to ensure that that kind of organization, and how did you manage to, you know, to use those strategies in order to ensure, again, a continuous improvement of this operation?
Mm-hmm. Well, as I said earlier, in that specific team, I didn't end up staying. I went to do something else because by the time that I was there, at least the position was not formalized, and I wanted to, you know, I was set on, you know, being a DesignOps person. And I think back then in Finland, there was no DesignOps position open anywhere anyway. So like, so then I went somewhere else, but because I have done that kind of work in the next job that I had, which was a design systems manager, and forming the DesignOps mentality in the team. I've just used basically my experience, and what my experience there told me was that, you know, you need to start mapping things out when you get inside the team. For example, doing skills mapping. Doing skills mapping is something that not only a DesignOps person can do, anyone can do in the team, in order to, you know, to say like, hey, these are the skills that I know, these are the skills that you know, I want to know more of that skill, for example, can you teach me, and I can teach you something else. And so, you know, you also create a mentoring program by doing that, almost like automatically, so to speak. And also you say, well, you know, we have this kind of budget, and if you want to learn more of that other skill, like service design or something like that, then here's this a list of workshops that you should use in order to get there and use your budget efficiently. Or, you know, we have also a general design team budget, so let's buy a bunch of books and let's create a library, you know, in a lending system, so to speak, so that people can just get the books home, read them on their free time, and then bring them back when they're ready. So, you know, there's a lot of things that is like, you know, you're going to do those things anyway, but like making the argument that, you know, someone can at least lead the efforts and make sure that they're organized, and make sure that things are done in a specific way that's not going to be wasted efforts, for example. It's something that it's important, and, you know, it's easy to advocate that, you know, at some point you need to have some sort of order, you know, inside a design team, because otherwise, you know, people might be too busy to do things with each other. So then, you know, you try to find the common spaces where you can also bring the team together.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. I think Daphne needs to ask something. So Daphne,
Sure.
Go ahead.
Hello, thanks a lot for
Hello.
your presentation. I would like to ask, like, we see that the majority of IT industry companies are agile oriented when it comes to frameworks and everything. And there is that saying from the manifesto that let's go with the actions over documentation and everything. So I just wanted to ask you, could you give us an example from your experience that you encountered some kind of like conflict or imposter syndrome when it comes to the DesignOps role? And thanks in advance.
Yeah, thanks. That's it's a thought-provoking question. Conflict. I mean, you will always find some sort of levels of conflict within the team. The question is it a healthy conflict, or is it something that comes from, let's say, misunderstanding? Change is the only constant, right? But everyone hates change until something again becomes the change things becomes the norm. So like when you go in, it's I would say it's okay for companies to think of agile, but we also have to remember that agile was never meant to be a thing for the whole organization, right? It was meant to help teams, engineering teams specifically, to work better together. So I'm not saying that I'm correct here, but at least my opinion is that design doesn't really work well with agile, at least not in the traditional sense of agile. So designers can be part of a team, but definitely going inside a daily and saying, hey, today I drew 5 more boxes than yesterday, it's not gonna help everyone. But if you can use your time in a better way in those dailies by saying, these are the problems that we surfaced from the users. Maybe this is something that connects the developers themselves with the users more and with the problems that they're trying to solve. So then, you can in a way try to find ways where you can still be part of the agile process, so to speak, as a designer, but also be trying to transform it in a way that it makes more sense and brings more value to you, but also to your team as well. Yeah, and I'm not saying, by the way, let's abolish agile or something like that, but I'm just saying that originally it was meant to not be for a full organization. It was meant to be for small development teams that they want to just be agile. They want to do things fast.
Thank you, Daphne. Stratos with a question. Stratos, go ahead.
Also, Solvar, if I'm not butchering your name, you have a question. It's in the chat. We can have you ask after Stratos.
Yeah, let's go with Stratos, and then Solvar, if you want to ask the question directly after that, or I'm going to give it. Yeah, Pavlos after Stratos. Where is Stratos?
Okay. Here.
On the top.
Stratos, go on.
Yes. Is there a way, from your perspective, that you can justify to the stakeholders that there is a need for another designer to hire in the team? Do you have any specific metrics, or just the feeling, sense of feeling?
There can be of course. There's a sense of feeling, as in kind of like you might ask your designers to work on a new project and then tell you that they simply do not have time. Obviously, that's not a metric per se, but that's what we're trying to do, for example, by working with Jira in our team. And what does that mean? Basically, is that we try to take a base mark of let's say a sprint, which is an agile term, so 2 weeks. Being like one story. So when we make one story in Jira, it means that this designer is going to be working for 2 weeks. Obviously, that doesn't mean anything really until you start adding tasks. What are the things that I'm going to be doing for this? But then kind of like, once you make that process work correctly, Jira, I know, once you make that process work correctly, then you can start having metrics, and you can say, well, out of 16 designers, bringing always my examples, 15 designers are 100% capacity in the last 5 months, for example. And now that we have the budget discussions, we should open the discussion of having more designers in the team, because we also know that they're capacity because they have to do also administrational stuff. They have to help with the design team and the culture, like, you know, advocate for the design system as well and stuff like that. And they have to have time for their own professional development as well. So yes, you have to try to evidence it somehow. We try now, it's a pilot for us, of course, but we try to do it through Jira and through some sort of, like, you know, metrics that we can pull out. But we try to, as I said earlier, we're not using the Jira in the traditional sense of how developers are using with their own story points, but we try to find our way that makes sense for us, so that, of course, also designers can use it. So, you know, I have been working in Jira trying to create a lot of automations so designers don't have to fill in certain things, but these things are happening in the background once they create a ticket themselves as well. So yeah, their well-being can be a metric. That's very true. And, you know, as I said earlier, for me, it's the most important thing is the sanity of the design team. It's not even about attrition rates, because attrition rates can be attributed to anything else. Kind of like, you know, your design team might be the best team ever, but let's say if the executives of that company are not, then people might leave because of that. And it's unfortunate, but it happens. Yes. So, like, you know, doing a lot of surveys, for example, you know, having like I don't know if you know Peakon survey. It's a survey that it's something that, you know, you can ask every quarter or something like that. It's a tool. It might be acquired by Workday, which is another horrible tool. But like the Peakon survey is actually quite good because it has some industry standards as well. So, like, you know, it ties your company to the specific industry that company is in. And then I tell you that, you know, when you're talking about team autonomy and how the designers feel about that, the industry standard is, you know, the number is 8, but in your team is 7 point something. So it means that it's lower. It means that it's a number that you should look at and have a conversation with your team. You know, why do they not feel autonomous enough for doing their job, for example? What are the things that you should be solving? They do provide you some sort of general recommendations, stuff like that. But I feel, you know, using those numbers as a conversation is actually really good. And as a metric, of course, because then you can say, well, you know, when we started doing the surveys, our numbers were low, but then as we kept on identifying things that we should solve, you know, the sentiment went up, for example, and the team is now more happy.
Thank you, Stratos. Pavlos with a question, and then Sotiris.
Is my quite well?
No.
Can
I
you
was
hear
some
me?
trouble hearing you, Pavlos.
Yeah, I thought so. Let me just try to fix that. Maybe I will take the next one.
Maybe we can read the question. It's okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, I will give Pavlos' question. Just let me find it. Here it is. Can you give us a piece of work you have done and you feel proud about, and why? And I will ask a question here. Can you remember the first DesignOps task you have done in your working life? So
yeah. Let's start with the first. I think the first thing that I have done in that sense was to ask that the team that I was referring to before, the one that they had like some sort of like conflict or friction within them, if they would be willing to have like some workshops with me. And, you know, I wanted to understand if I can actually pull it off in a way myself. You know, it's like, you know, am I good at this? You know, can I do this? You know, and then if I do, then kind of like, you know, can I create some sort of visibility that it can show something to people? Like in that team, for example, in that company, the team was they didn't have design managers really. They had like line managers, and they were engineering people, for example. So then in that sense, you know, I had to translate a lot of things to them as well. So that was one of the first things that I've done. And I would say that it was quite successful in a way, because it created, at least, you know, again, it created conversations. People started asking questions. People started asking, how can we do it to developers as well, and so on. And so that's where things started for me. And what am I most proud of? That's very It's very hard to say. Of course, I am proud of that work that I've done because, as I said earlier as well, 2 years later, they sent me this screenshot from their workshop, and it was like, of course, I had imposter syndrome because I left. I didn't manage to actually create that position for myself. I went to another company, and then after I went to another company, then I've heard that, you know, they created the position officially. So I was like, God damn it, I could have stayed maybe, but but yeah, it was nevertheless, it was good, and it actually made me feel, because I said it happened way later, that hey, you know, like I've actually done something good, or at least the designers feel that, and that's again the most important thing, right? You know, at least the designers thought that the work that I've done there was actually good, and it echoed. Even after I was gone as well, so that was a good thing for me, and a good, you know, imposter syndrome punch in a way, to punch it lower so at least it doesn't surface anytime soon again.
Great, thank you very much. A question from Sotiris. Sotiris, are you able to unmute your microphone?
Yes. Hello.
Hello.
Can you hear me all right?
Yeah.
Hello,
Yes.
hello.
Angela, thank you very much for this conversation. So my question is about the blockers that come out of teams that practically you need to operate, your team needs to operate. As I have seen in many kind of design operations team, there's a lot of, practically there's a bridge connecting legal, procurement, and other departments in order to do the things that the design teams require you to do. How do you handle these blockers, and if possible, how do you eventually tend to remove them?
You know, there's no single strategy for this, but I have a very unorthodox strategy to that, which is being a pain in the ass. So like if you need something, you just have to keep on asking until you get it. Otherwise, you know, you will not shut up. I'm half joking there, you know, but kind of like, you know, trying to create a need that actually exists, and it's true. Like, you know, it's not like, hey, the design team needs this tool because it's fun. So like, you know, that's not gonna sell well probably, but like if there's a need, you know, you try to create a need for it. You try to perhaps make a presentation and make the things there, you know, this is why we need it, this is the actual cost, this is the benefits that it brings, and so on, and creating a case for it. These are the teams that are using these, and you know, we know that they like it. Like, for example, one example again, because I did mention at some point from Sketch to Figma, and probably I'm not the only person who has done this transition. So like in a previous team, we wanted to change from Sketch to Figma, but of course it's like, you know, how do you adopt a new tool? Like, you know, you need to talk to procurement, as you said, and so on. So what we did was, because Figma was free to use for a limited purpose, we created a few components of the design system that was in Sketch. We created those in Figma, and then we said to designers, hey, you know, this is a new tool, play around, see if you like it, and tell us what you feel. Okay, you know, again, this is nothing. It's just like a new shiny tool that the team can use. That doesn't mean really anything. But then we went and we talked to other teams on how do they use Figma and why did they switch. So then they gave us their own perspectives as well, and kind of like, you know, they, in a way, they bolstered our own arguments about why we wanted to go away. Like, for example, I remember still the time where we used Figma and we used Sketch and Abstract together. And for one project, I wanted to sync that project because I didn't have it in my computer. And it took 1.5 hours to sync a Sketch file in my computer so I can actually open it up to find out that I actually didn't have anything that I needed in the end. But like, you know, it was such a thing that was like, why do I need to wait so much time for something to sync? So it wasn't something that was perhaps, you know, big, let's say, but it was something that, among other things, it made much more sense to sort of, you know, adopt a new tool that is actually more real time, that it's on the browser as well. You know, like people can not only use Macs if they don't want to, and you can of course share better with developers and so on. I'm not saying, you know, this is the state of Sketch right now, obviously, and I'm bringing any tools down. But at that point, at least, it wasn't working for us. So then we had to make the switch. But we also, show the designers, hey, this is the new tool. And by the way, if you want to adopt it, we already have some components. So it's not going to be a big work for you to recreate the system here and keep on doing your work in a new system as well.
Well, that is the state for Sketch right now, but
I haven't tried it, so that's why I'm not commenting. But
let's not dunk on Sketch.
Yeah. No thinking.
Yeah. So, Angelos, a question about DesignOps and territorialism in general in companies. People don't want other people to get in their territory, right? So, if you're a DesignOps manager, then you have to deal with designers, researchers, research operations, and as you mentioned in your presentation, in the introduction, I'm guessing HR as well, right? So how do you handle all these cases? Who gets responsible, and how much clapping are you doing with each other department?
Yeah, I never had problems with HR because, like, from their point of view, at least they really want to understand how can their job be easier with, let's say, hiring designers, for example, and like onboarding them correctly and so on. Obviously, they're more than happy to leave the design specific onboarding to the design team most of the time, at least. But they usually handle the regular onboarding, and in that, of course, you don't have to do something about it, perhaps, but you can always help them in kind of like, well, designers, they need these things, so maybe developers might need those things as well in their general onboarding as well. And so let's say that the most friction or like disputes that you might have might come from not even engineering itself, but like product management, because I feel design is much closer many times to product management than it is to engineering. But I think that you can solve it. I'm not going to say easily because that's not a thing, but like you can solve it by creating common understanding, again, thinking of how can you visualize it. So maybe by having a workshop with product management and say, what are the things that you're doing as product managers, map them out in Miro, for example. And then as a designer, the same thing, map all your different activities in Miro. And then, overlapping them together and then understanding, what are the things that are indeed overlapping and what are the things that are unique to each specific, not team, but like profession, I guess. So then, once you understand these things, then you can start having discussions, or maybe you can bring some extra layer to it and understand what is the RASI model, for example, who is responsible for this, who is accountable, consulted, informed, and so on. So like, again, using a lot of mapping, a lot of templates and a lot of stuff to aid the conversation, not just, asking PMs, why do you think your job is important, but, tell us what you do. And then designers, tell us also what you do, and then bringing them perhaps all together, saying these are all the things that you are doing, either overlapping or either you are duplicating your efforts. Is that actually smart? If a PM is doing this and you're doing this as well, you also reverse the question to the PM: is this smart for your designer to be doing these duplicate efforts? Like, shouldn't you be joining together and working on this? So. Creating conversation, creating visibility for people. It's all about that. And DesignOps is by default, it's like not central, but it's like it's out there. It doesn't fit in a way, so to speak. When you think about work itself, it doesn't fit in any team.
Mm-hmm. Have you observed the same principles that you mentioned working with research operations?
Mm-hmm. Well, research operations, at least I haven't happened. I wasn't lucky enough to work in a company that is that big to have research operations. Usually it falls into, again, becoming a mindset of the first researchers. They're doing operationalization as in repositories and stuff like that to make their life easier. And then you're there in a way to support them. And at some point, if that becomes a need for, a big research team now needing operations, that's only a positive thing. But if you have established DesignOps, I would say that having established research ops becomes a thing after you have a certain number of researchers that you need to make sure that again, they're not duplicating efforts and they have processes in place to make things happen.
All right, nice. We have another question, I think.
I have a question from Marius. It was a question at the time of the presentation, so it would be better to be asked back then. So, Angelos, I'm going to ask you to check your presentation for this question. So, Marius asked to elaborate more on the visibility part.
Marius, you're here. Marius, we have Marius with us, right?
Yeah,
would you like to unmute?
Send me that video.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Hey, Marius, okay.
So, yeah, thanks for the mic. I guess my question is around the topic of visibility. So how do you enhance or create a space for the visibility of the work of the team, of the design team, to be exposed in terms of many times there would be like NDAs involved and you can't really show pictures and post like final things. And how do you handle that and enhance it? Thanks.
At least from the, again, in-house point of view, I would say that usually there might not be NDAs. At least I haven't encountered that. So in that sense, if nothing, let's say, you know, if things are not prohibited or hidden, so to speak, you can either create some shared sessions with developers and PMs and say, you know, like, let's have some demo sessions together and we can show things and, you know, you can give us your feedback and so on. Having some structured review sessions with designers and PMs and developers might be also like, you know, a very good thing to have. Now, if you're talking from the point of view of NDAs, I would have to understand a little bit better. Is it like from external point of view, like, for example, from a person who is working as a consultant somewhere?
Delay. I was meaning more in the way that you externalize into, let's say, the community and the world around your job to attract more talent and
right.
promote your.
Yeah, it's about how do you promote, like, you know, how do you make your design team desirable, find new talent, and so on. That's a good question. I think, you know, things like, you know, overall processes, as long as you don't go into the nitty-gritty, you can always talk about them in a manner that kind of like, you know, you can say, for example, you know, these are the ways that designers are making their lives better in our company without sharing stuff. In some teams, it means that if you want to talk outside of your company, basically about your company and about your design team, it might mean that you have to check with legal and with marketing and get the approval from them in order to talk about certain things. And what that would mean in that sense is that, you know, you would work with them in order to understand how can you make your message in a way that it doesn't really, you know, go against your policies, for example, but also that the message still makes sense for people to, you know, to create attraction for them. For us, for example, I don't think that we have that much, but we want to create like a website for the design team that has, like, you know, a few things about the team, and maybe in the future have some articles and stuff like that there that the designers would write. So in order to do that, then we need to talk a little bit with our marketing and our not legal, but like basically, I guess, brand and messaging in a way to make sure that we're, you know, not doing things that are that might bring some troubles, let's say, to the design team.
Thank you. That's a good start. Thank you.
Thank you, Marius. Angelos, a combo question. We have touched some of the points, but I have to give it to you right away. So, does a design ops person need to be a designer? And the second question, what are the skills, the soft, the hard skills that someone has to have to be in a design ops role?
Yeah, that's a very good question. Does it have to be design? I would say from my personal point of view, you know, of course, there's no industry standard, so to speak, but like from my personal point of view, I would imagine that someone who comes from a designer, like myself, for example, shares the problems of the teams, and they can empathize better with, you know, what the team needs in order to be successful. If that person was not a designer, they might not have even just the vocabulary or stuff like that in order to talk with a team in the right way, and even the team might then not be able to or might not be comfortable to open up to a person who might come there as, I don't know, like what could that be? A salesperson becoming a design ops person? Let's say something crazy like that. It might be weird if the person is really interested into design and have done studies. Like I don't know, they might have a knack for it, so to speak. So it might be something to think about. But yeah, it depends. A lot of the design skills, I would say, as I said earlier, because I believe that design ops is like service design, basically. It's all about, researching and prototyping, but of course your prototyping becomes much more abstract in a way. You create processes that you try out with designers and things like that, but nevertheless, the skills are transferable, so to speak, when it comes to that. So, if you think about service design and research even, I feel that, I want to become much more acquainted with research now that I have been, for example, in the past, because I feel that it almost feels like a superpower to have like, very, very, very good research skills, for example.
Great, thank you.
Interesting framing of design ops.
Yeah.
One question would be, like you mentioned the three-legged stool, but the NNG example that says how our work creates impact, how we work together, and how we get work done, right? So I'm sure that some people here might be interested in starting the guerrilla design ops journey. So which leg would you suggest this would create more value for this endeavor?
Yeah, doing things internally, it's a low effort thing. So like, saying with designers like, hey, should we do this sort of activities and map out some things together might be, a very good start. So like I would start from there as in, low effort, but also kind of like, high enough value. Working with PMs and doing things there, for example, that might be a thing. So as I said, having maybe some workshops to understand what is the shared responsibilities that we have and what is the RASI model of designers and PMs and so on. That would be something as well to think about, and creating the structures for cross collaboration to happen more effectively. It's in everyone's best interest, of course. So these are things I would go with if I had to choose, let's say.
So the
in engineering, it's together, like right? You can solve a lot of problems with design systems as well and stuff like that. So like that might not be your job, or it might be your job. It depends on its team. And by the way, sorry, I have like 2 minutes or something like that. I really have to drop after that. Is that okay with everyone?
Yeah,
perfect.
Thank you for your time. Great. Just let me share my screen again to have a proper outro.
Daphne, wait, let's give time to Angelos. Where can people find you? And maybe ask you more questions, connect with you?
You can find me on LinkedIn, of course, Angelos Arnis, probably not so many, hopefully. Twitter is still a thing, at least for now. I'm using it actively, but I nowadays have more of a observer role, so to speak. But yeah, LinkedIn is a good place to start with.
Great. So let's give the questions we have to Angelos and use the hashtags UX and UX Greece to be able to get a book as a gift. Angelos, thank you very much for being here with us today.
Thank you so much, Angelos.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you, everyone.
You have something to do, so you're okay. We'll give you the permission to go. Thank you again very much. Just an outro for the rest of us. So as we said, give your questions to Angelos on LinkedIn. Use the hashtags UX and UX Greece. If you do this in the next 4 hours, we are going to, you're going to be able to participate in our not contest, just to get some books from our sponsors. No, this is the right slide. Thanks to our sponsors, Junction Labs, From Scratch Studio, and the UX Prodigy. Stay tuned. This is the last meetup, the last session we have for this season. So stay tuned for the next one, what is going to take place on September or October. I have another thing to say for those that you are in Thessaloniki next week on June 9, 10, and 11. the From Scratch Studio is organizing an in-person product design hackathon as part of the Thessaloniki Design Week. So there will be spots for about 15 people to participate. And on Sunday, we have our next Thessaloniki UX meetup, where we are going to see all the results of the product design hackathon and be in person again after 2 years and have all those conversations we are missing the past years. So I think that's all. Thank you very much. Angelos, again, thank you very much for being here. Thanks a million, everyone, and see you on our next event after the summer. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone. Bye.